Hello there, YouTube and YouTubers. Today we're taking a look at the mechanic Foretell from Kaldheim. This ability has the biggest impact on the limited format from all the new abilities that have been released. So, like the ability text said, anytime during your turn you're allowed to pay 2 generic, so any color, mana, and exile this card from your hand, and then during a other turn, so not during this turn but any other turn, you can pay the Foretell cost and then cast a card. We find these cards in all of the colors in the set. So that means that white, blue, black, green, red all have the Foretell ability. It's great that we have an ability again in the set, just like in the very last set, an ability that makes it possible to cast cards from your hand no matter the amount of screw you might otherwise have had in your limited deck. Screw meaning I don't have enough lands or I don't have the right colors. And yeah, the Foretell ability really helps in shoring up issues you might have in that department. It's quite common in draft or in sealed to not have enough lands, not have the right colors, because on the one hand, any limited deck you're building is going to play as few lands as is still viable for your deck. As a constructed deck will often have about 80% of its cards making more than one colored land. But your limited deck will often have only a few of those lands which can do that, while your constructed deck will be built by mostly those and as few basic lands as possible. But your limited deck will have, say, 14 or more basic lands quite often, which means you can get screwed in colors quite often. And also because your deck is not as streamlined as a constructed deck is, you will also often find yourself with not enough lands and also no ways to fix the amount of lands you can have. So Foretell helps in having less mana screw in amount of lands and less mana screw in your colors. So why do I say colors? Well, oftentimes you will find yourself in a limited situation, so in a draft game, you will be able to play either your white or, say, your green from your 2-color deck at the moment. And then at some point you've played all the white cards out of your hand and you're still there with a few green cards. Now normally you would not be able to cast them at all, but if the green cards have the Foretell ability, then at least you can already make your down payments in the generic mana department, at least, of the card. Well, then later on, when you have suspended your foretold your green card and you finally find a forest, you will be able to easily play your green card while also still playing, say, another white card or foretelling something else. You've already made your down payments, and when you finally get your green land, you will be able to get going much quickly and much faster than you otherwise would. So that's great. I think those are the good parts about Foretell. Now, as I already put down, there's also some gripes, some things I don't like that much about Foretell. I don't really understand why they decided to put it in every color. Now, especially saying this because I know that the white, for instance, color of this set doesn't have any snow cards at all. So I would say that white needs a slight nudge through its mechanics in other departments. And I think that Foretell could have been one of the ways of doing this. Now, blue and green are quite filled in mechanics in this set. So blue has snow, they have giants, they have Foretell. Green, they have elves, they have... Oh, and they have shapeshifters as well in both blue and green. So I would say maybe they should have decided that blue and green don't need Foretell as well as having shapeshifters in them. So that's one of the things I don't really like about it. You can find it in any color. The next thing I would have liked to see, they decided that the only permanent types on which you can find these Foretell cards would be sorceries and creatures. This has to do with the speed at which you can cast instants, especially. I often find myself playing limited and thinking, well, I could either straight up cast this demon bolt right now, for instance this red card here in the middle, this instant, but I could just also foretell it and then in my opponent's upkeep or in my, just after they declare their attackers, cast it for 1 red mana. The total cost of the card is the same and only the moment I cast it is different, so might as well foretell this even though I'm only 1% or less to use this card really through its foretell. I don't really like it. I think the foretell ability would have been much easier to understand for players if it was only on sorceries and creatures. Especially also because if you do put it on only sorceries and creatures, then not being able to cast it this turn is a real disadvantage instead of a, well, oh, it's an instant anyway, so why do I care if I can't cast it now? I'll just do it before my next turn starts. A creature, when it comes into play, can't attack immediately. So being able to put it in foretell now, then the turn thereafter casting it, means that it takes more or less 3 turns before the creature can attack. Which I think is, well, it's interesting. I don't know, it is of course a disadvantage, only being allowed to attack with the creature 3 turns from now if you use its foretell ability. But because the player is allowed to choose, it would lead to, well, interesting play, I think. But now when your opponent foretells a card, especially if they're playing, say, red or white, or even with the other colors, you don't really know if that actually means that it will take a few turns before the foretold card will become active. And I think that's just less interesting. It's less things a player can think about. Even though there are more possibilities, it's less possible for a player to play around a new way with these cards. If you knew that every time your opponent foretold something, they definitely can't do something with it until their next turn, and if it's a creature, it even means that it can't attack for 3 turns. You get a lot more information as the opponent of the player using the foretell ability, and that leads to interesting situations, I think. So I don't really like them using it on every permanent type. There are creatures with the ability, there are artifacts with the ability, there are multiple instants and sorceries with the ability. I would have preferred only creatures and sorceries, but hey, it's what it is. Another part, the last part, about the foretell ability is something that we really notice when we're playing online. The foretell ability can be done at any point during your turn, whether it is your upkeep, your end of turn step, during the attack while your opponent is picking up his cola, I don't know, whatever he's doing. It doesn't really matter, you can do it at any point. Personally, I would have preferred if they said that you could only do it as a sorcery, and that would change the card text's ability as well. You may pay 2 mana and exile this card from your hand face down. Use this ability only as a sorcery. You can cast it for its foretell cost on any later turn. I think that would be much easier to understand and process for players, and I think those parts are important, especially for newer players, because Magic is a difficult enough game, and I want new players to, as easily as possible, pick up the game and then find interesting interactions, not because the rules are a certain way, but because they found interesting ways to use their cards. So I want the rules to be easy and the play to be difficult. Anyway, those were the great parts and the less than great parts, I think, about the foretell ability. But I do also think that at Wizards they've decided that they wanted to make their calming sets differently. At least I hope so. Because this new way of making abilities for sets, I think is amazing. We've recently had the spell lens in Zendikar, and now we have the foretell ability. Both of these make it much easier for you to have an actual limited game, even if your draws are not perfect. So both of the abilities of the spell lens and also of this foretell ability make it so that even if your draws are not perfect, you can still do something. And it leads to many more games where you feel like your deck is performing adequately enough. And I like that a lot. So let's hope that stays. Let's hope that we see abilities that make more limited games turn the way they more or less should, and that people will play more positively, will have more positive matches in their limited games. Anyway, that's the ideas I had about Foretell for now. If you liked the video, please leave a like, and also subscribe if you want to see more talks about Magic the Gathering. See ya!